morning, almost afternoon. I'd like to call to order this work session of the Southampton Town Board on this 4th day of February, 2021. Please rise if you're able to and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. All right. So we have work session. Let's start with a roll call. Sunday, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman,
Here.
Councilwoman Lofstad,
Here.
Councilman Martell,
Here.
Councilman Bouvier,
Here.
Councilman Scavone.
He may have said here, but I didn't hear him.
Here.
Okay,
How's my signal?
it's better now.
It's okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are still in the midst of a pandemic. We have Ryan Murphy, who's our COVID coordinator and our public safety director here. He's joining us. We've been taking time at each of these work sessions just to brief the board on any changes in state guidance, some of the numbers, some of the concerns, and allow people to ask questions. We're doing our best to keep people safe. I know there's a lot of frustration out there with people wanting to get vaccinated. Seems like it's getting a little bit better, but I'm going to turn it over to Ryan and let Ryan give us an update.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Thank you, board members. So the spread of COVID, the positivity, percent positive numbers, and the number of people that we're seeing as positives seems to be decreasing slightly, which is a good sign, and that appears to be occurring, not just locally within the town of Southampton. We were averaging, probably about 50 a day, and looking at some of the more recent days, the numbers that have come out from County OEM, it looks like we're trending down towards, numbers in the 30s, which is a much better sign. And that seems to be the general trend in the county, in our region. So since the last meeting, I think that there has been some changes that the governor's office had announced. There was some changes to, high-risk sports and schools, and the counties have developed plans for the school districts on how they can carry out those, high-risk sports, utilizing testing, and information about that's available on the county website. The governor's office also announced a change to allow for weddings or wedding receptions, marriage receptions, I believe is how it's specifically phrased in the release, to accommodate marriage receptions for up to 150 people or 50% of a venue's capacity, whichever is lower. So it's certainly not more than 100, but if a venue normally has a capacity of 200, it would be 50% of that. So your max number would only be 100. That's all we know about that. I wish I had more to tell you what was involved in that. It involves pre-testing in order to be able to do something of that nature, but there is no additional guidance at this time. We've reached out to the state and the county and submitted a list of probably 20 different questions to them, because we are already receiving inquiries from the public and from some of the venues within our jurisdiction, as I'm sure are all of the different jurisdictions out there, to the effect of, are there other limitations associated with this? Can a group photo be taken? Are there limitations on the number of people at tables? Who has to be the possessor of the testing records? The venue, the individual, they all need local health department approval. So we don't know, who the records maintainer will be of that, because there are HIPAA concerns associated with it as well. There are a lot of different questions there. And then to go beyond, we have already received questions from some of our facilities within the town, some of our venues, that, you know, is this specifically and just for weddings, or does this open up a opportunity for, you know, parties up to 150 or 50% of the capacity of the location that isn't a wedding? That could a fire department installation dinner occur at a location, you know, if it met those criteria? We don't know what the answer to those questions are, but we have posed all of them to both the state and the county at this time to try and get a little bit more guidance on it and see what we get back on those things. As far as vaccination, the vaccine rollout continues to happen. We're seeing some of the people that got their first shots in phase 1B are getting their second shots as of today. 1B, the first shots opened on Thursday, about 21 days ago. So if somebody was in the Pfizer category, they would start to get their second shots today. Moderna's, you know, additional week beyond that. So they would be next week. So we're starting to see people in the phase 1B category getting their second doses. We do find in general, for anybody, you know, out there that's either looking to get their doses or has already gotten their first, we are generally hearing that the second dose of the vaccine is hitting people harder than the first dose. The effects are very individualized. Too severe that we've been made aware of yet, but people just not generally feeling well after they get the second dose. People that had no side effects from the first dose whatsoever are experiencing some side effects, it's fevers or headaches or just general, you know, malaise from the second dose. So just to kind of make sure people are aware of that and managing expectations, that if somebody does start that regimen of the 2-dose shot, they know that they might be down and out for a day or two once they get that second dose, and we don't want to mislead to a false sense of security if they experience no side effects on the first dose, that, you know, the second dose isn't going to have an impact on them. We did receive word earlier this week. Councilwoman Lofstad passed along something to me regarding a pop-up vaccination location at St. Rosalie's. We had no knowledge of this. We found out about it when the word kind of went out to the general public. The outreach was conducted once we got word of it to ask the county if it was their site, and they had no knowledge of it at the time either. And then we contacted the state, and it turns out it is a state sponsored or run site that they just hadn't had a chance to tell us or the county about it yet. The appointments had already been scheduled out at that point, and apparently were soaked up very, very, very quickly. I don't know how many in total. We didn't get any other information beyond that. The vaccines occurred yesterday, Wednesday, and the state will be back for second doses 21 or 28 days, you know, later after the first dose. I don't know which type of vaccine was given, whether it was Pfizer or Moderna. I got the impression from my communications with the governor's representative that the doses that were given out were, you know, 100 people or less, that it was a very small quantity, that they were booked up in an hour or less, and had soaked up every single dose that was available in a very short period of time. So these pop-ups may be occurring elsewhere. I've asked for advance notice on it. If we receive advance notice on it, we'll obviously put it out there to the public. We know that there's a huge demand, but the state has not guaranteed we'll be able to, or I don't know, you know, willing to share these pop-up locations much in advance of the pop-up. There's some concerns that with such low amounts of doses that are available at those locations, they don't want a flurry of people that are then disappointed by not getting it. So this was, I think, a very targeted pop-up to some of the St. Rosalie's parishioners associated with the Corazon Center, from the Latino population in the area that were struggling to find other locations elsewhere. the pop-ups are supposed to be very targeted as per the state of New York to hit either higher risk or lower served populations within the communities as defined by their standards. So we'll try and get information out there if we become aware of anything, but I wouldn't count on us knowing about the pop-up much before it actually occurs based on the statements that we've received from them. Other than that, we have had an opportunity. The county worked with us to get some of our employees that were in the 1B category vaccinated up at the community college in Riverhead. So we were able to get maybe 10. It wasn't a huge amount, but maybe about 10 of our employees or less vaccinated up at the community college last week. And that went very smoothly. And we're thankful to the cooperative efforts with the county exec's office and Lisa Black to set that up and get some of our employees in there. And we are currently conducting outreach to try and see if we can make arrangements with Rite Aid or CVS or Walgreens to set up some sort of a cooperative arrangement with senior services. As we've discussed in the past, we're willing to shuttle people if we need to one of the stores or make use of one of our community centers, whatever the case may be, to work with them to help conduct some of the vaccinations of the 65 and over population. So the way the priorities work right now is hospitals and healthcare facilities are supposed to be vaccinating 1A people, which is healthcare and EMS personnel. The county and state sites are supposed to be largely utilized for 1B essential worker populations. And then any vaccines that roll out to pharmacies and doctors' offices are supposed to be used for 1B 65 and over populations. That's the priority that's been assigned to each one of those types of vaccination locations. Outside of that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
How about the pop-up locations? Are those for the certain groups that have already been identified that are allowable, or are those for the general public?
I don't know. I genuinely, I don't have an answer to that question. I believe they are for people that fall into the 1B category, but it might be more targeted towards like certain demographics of the population as opposed to others. So I don't know that the people that are going to or took advantage yesterday of the St. Rosalie's pop-up, for example, although they may be from a particular demographic of our population, of our residents, they, to my understanding, all still fell into the 65 and over category that were eligible under 1B. It wasn't just a flat out general pop vaccination site, to my knowledge. We'll try and get more clarity on that from the government.
There's no general population vaccinations yet at all. You have to still be in one of the categories. Have they amended the 1B though to state pre-existing conditions? Because I know they were looking at 65 and older or younger than 65 with certain health conditions. They haven't published that though.
That's still identified in 1C. That has not been added to 1B yet. It's still 1C people.
So if you're 50 and have an immunodeficiency, you still can't get vaccinated.
That's correct at the present time.
Yeah, they have to fix that, because there's some very healthy 65-year-olds and some very compromised 50-year-olds, even 40-year-olds, 30-year-olds, cancer survivors.
It seems that the governor is trending towards more local control over these things. The sports and some of these other things. He did make mention in his press conference the other day about leaving it to some of the local governments to potentially add people into the phase categories. So I think that this is a conversation that we might be able to hopefully have more locally with county health soon to get folks added into a category like that.
Ryan, what about supply? How are we doing in terms of doses of vaccine? Has that improved?
There was expectation that the dose amounts coming to the state of New York were going to go up. I think that they've gone back up a little bit. There are reports that we are expecting. I believe last that I heard was 20% increases in dosages that were going to be available to the state of New York. And there's a lot of discussion about tremendous increases in the supply that might be available in the coming, weeks or months. I don't know that we've seen that dose increase has materialized tremendously yet. So I don't think we'll see a huge impact to the availability of the population right now. But we may have gone back up towards that, 300 or 350,000 mark, whereas we had dropped down to the 250,000 mark for a week or two there, which had cut our supply from where it started.
Okay. Any other questions for Ryan? And your men and women are still enforcing the COVID restrictions, correct?
Yes, yes. In fact, I was just working on an updated document for Sunday a second ago because we have, special event applications that are coming in, and obviously a lot of this stuff is kind of changing day by day, week by week, month by month, but we're trying to create an updated guidance, one pager for people that are interested in doing things in the special events category based on what we know right now. And we'll have to probably continuously update that as we get closer and closer towards the summertime. And if more vaccine supply becomes available and the regulations ease up a little bit because there's more of a comfort level, we'll amend it accordingly. But we're trying to address these things as best as possible based on what we know now.
The public should know too, to leave extra time if they're planning a special event. So that, because, the state is also a required sign off on these special events, that I don't know how long it's going to take the state to issue their determinations, but they should plan further ahead.
Without a doubt. And at the same time, not just plan further ahead, but to make sure we, again, manage their expectations appropriately. We always tell people that, they might get an approval now from us and or the state. But if we see spikes in COVID numbers as we go into, March or April, they have to expect that those approvals are subject to change depending on the changing circumstances locally. And if we see numbers go up, that approval weeks before an event could be retracted if it has to out of safety concerns. We hope that doesn't occur, but we are very upfront with folks as they are applying to us. I know Sunday's office is delivering that message to every single person that comes to their door and has even an inquiry about these types of things.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other questions for Ryan? Okay. All right. Thank you, Ryan. We'll let you go.
Sure.
So next on the agenda is the review of the draft agenda for the next meeting, for the February 9th meeting. And I know we have a 12 o'clock item on our agenda, but why don't we try to get through this as quick as possible, and that way Sunday can publish it. So if everybody can pull up their agenda, this is for the February 9th meeting. It will be a 1 o'clock meeting. We'll do it via Zoom. So as much as I'm looking forward to the days that we can meet in person, we are not there yet. So I'm going to keep these meetings via Zoom. So let's see, we have public hearings, 5 of them. The first one is on a trail easement with the abandonment of Harrison Avenue in North Sea. The second is to delete a provision. This is the one about the zoning board's ability to grant this change from one non-conforming use to another. I could say on this, I'm trying to set up a meeting. We had to cancel because of the snowstorm with Jim and Katie and some others to discuss some of the comments that were at the last public hearing. And, we had some people express concerns about projects that were in midstream and not being exempted. We had some concerns about whether there should be standards or not. So The planning board is also weighed in a little bit on this, so I'm trying to have the planning board, they sort of were um, good idea for the most part, but maybe not for everything. Maybe certain things should stay at the zoning board that are very similar to the current non-conforming use, but anything that is wholly different should go to the town board. So we have some things to talk about, but I'm glad I've got the conversation started. The third thing there is a public hearing to consider a local law enacting Southampton Town Code Chapter 160 entitled Mining and Land Reclamation. I think that's Tommy John's sponsored legislation regarding the water testing. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. This would require sand mines to have water monitoring wells as per the enabling legislation in 2017 from the state.
And is that the first public hearing on that model?
It is.
Okay. The next one is a public hearing, Town Code Chapter 250, outdoor sidewalk dining. This is something I'm asking you guys for. We've been allowing outdoor dining. Normally it ends in November, but we've extended it pretty much all through the winter, but I have to extend it every 5 days. And even on a day like today, people are opting to sit outside. I never really understood why we don't allow outdoor dining, after November. But that is the town code. So we can revisit, we can look at that issue, whether we even need to have that. But what this bill does, this resolution does, is it just, for the period of the pandemic, it suspends that law prohibiting outdoor dining. So I don't have to do this every 5 days. So I'm hoping that you guys will consider that and approve it. The next one is a public hearing to consider amending Town Code Chapter 8 as it relates to debt reduction for capital projects. I've discussed this in the past. We have a great policy. I don't know any other town that has such a policy, but if we end up with unanticipated surpluses when we close the books, that money is supposed to go to reduce the amount we were going to borrow later in the year. The problem with this year is we're going to the bond market prior to reconciling the books. And it's creating a situation where we know we're going to have some unanticipated surpluses, but we don't want to spend them until we've confirmed them. So this solves that problem by just saying once we've confirmed the books, it'll go toward the next borrowing, not necessarily the one that year. But I do anticipate a second borrowing this year. Len has been sort of in a hurry to get into the bond market because interest rates are at historic lows. And that could save us a lot of money. So I understand it. Len, did you want to say anything more about that public hearing?
No, I'm hoping there's not many comments and you close it and adopt that resolution the same night.
Right. So it's really just more of a technical problem. The debt reduction policy is forcing us to spend money that we haven't certified yet. So that's really all it is. It's really a technical issue. All right. Anybody have any questions about any of the public hearings that we'll be holding? Beautiful. All right. So let's go then to the draft resolutions, and we'll just stick to our tradition of just sort of, we'll read them. If anybody has a question on any of the resolutions, now is the time to fix it or to remove it or ask your questions. And then the next opportunity will be debating the bill. So at next Tuesday's meeting. So we're going to start with resolution 35820, which has been offered by Councilwoman Lofstad.
Town Board Resolution 35820, authorization for supervisor to sign application and contract to accept 2021 Suffolk County Youth Bureau funding for Southampton Town Youth Program.
35723 authorizes office supply purchases from Staples using Sourcewell contract. 35822 authorizes purchases of general building maintenance involving new construction, reconstruction and demolition from Renew Contracting and Restoration, Inc., using the Bay Shore Union Free School District contract. 35,744 authorizes roof replacement at Hampton Bays Annex from Statewide Roofing Incorporated.
Town Board Resolution ID 35809 authorizes supervisor to issue a satisfaction of a buyer benefit note and mortgage on a community benefit unit.
Town Board Resolution 35819 authorizes supervisor to sign a contract amendment with Suffolk County Office for the Aging to receive additional funding for the Senior Citizen Nutrition Program.
35,722 authorizes the purchase of safety shoes from the Suffolk County contract with Safeguard Safety Shoe Company.
Town Board Resolution 35821 authorizes supervisor to sign a contract with L.K. McLean Associates, P.C. for professional services associated with Reeve Bay Nature Trail and Catwalk.
Yeah, let me just stop on that one for a second. So, all right, so that's the property we purchased near the Big Duck that has sort of a peninsula that sticks out into Reeves Bay, and we're going to use CPF funds eventually to build a elevated catwalk to get you to the vista there, without, exposing yourself to, damaging the beach grasses or the marsh grasses, as well as, exposure to possible, ticks and things like that. It's going to be fully ADA compliant, and will be a nice place to get out into nature. It's a lovely walk. So I'm looking forward to this project, but I guess there's a little bit more work to be done on it. All right, Rick?
Town Board Resolution 35830 authorizes the supervisor to execute a 2021 service and maintenance agreement with Best Climate Control for the HVAC system located at the Central Garage Building.
35,831 authorizes the supervisor to execute a 2021 service and maintenance agreement with Best Climate Control for the HVAC system located at the town's main police headquarters building. 35,823 authorizes the supervisor to execute a 2021 Stop DWI grant agreement with Suffolk County. Rick is next.
Town Board Resolution 35824 authorizes the supervisor to execute Parks and Recreation agreements for programs. Town Board Resolution 35742 authorizes the supervisor to sign a contract extension, bituminous concrete and bituminous materials with East Island Asphalt Company. Town Board Resolution 35834 authorizes the supervisor to sign an extension to license agreement with Tita Green Food Service Incorporated for the operation of the food and beverage service at the Poxabog Golf Center, and authorize the supervisor to sign any and all documents pertaining to this license agreement.
35,825 awards and authorizes the supervisor to sign contract with J. Cole Construction Company, Inc. for Town Hall Accessibility New Elevator.
Town Board Resolution ID 35745 to reject bids and second notice to bidders for landscaping services at various town locations.
Town Board Resolution 35828, the 2021 notice to bidders for carbon changeout at the Hampton Bays Water District.
35,804 amends the 2020 budget for various departments. 35,773 amends 2021 adopted budget and authorized employee benefit reallocations. 35,775 amends the 2021 adopted budget for CTV and Sun TV to reallocate position. Maybe I'll explain that a little bit. Something I know that Frank has been working on. So we're sort of setting up the call center for Sun TV, which is the community access channel, just sort of breaking it out a little bit from CTV. And I think in this resolution, yeah, I think that's basically all this is really doing. It's allowing some salary to be on the Sun TV side. Hopefully I'm explaining that right. Next one, 3515 5774, authorize expenditures from park donation restricted account. This has to do with the dog park in East Quogue. So I think to purchase the water fountain there, $3,500. 35776, authorize expenditure from town police restricted account.
35721, appoint temporary Board of Assessment Review members for 2021. These are for people to grieve their taxes.
Town Board Resolution 35783, appoint Trails Advisory Board for 2021.
35817, authorize additional funds for Devitt Spellman Barrett as it relates to Vijvinkel versus Shea et al. 35813, continuation of legal services by Devitt Spellman Barrett LLP for 2021. 35816, continuation of legal services by Stephen Leventhal Esquire for ethics matters in 2021. 35815, continuation of legal services by Vincent Toomey Esquire for 2021. 35838, continuation of legal services by Siddleman, Ballin, Adler, and Hyman LLP as it relates to Rose Hill Road and Watermill. 35814, retain David Arnston Esquire of the Law Office of Thomas M. Voles PLLC for all matters involving sand mines in the town of Southampton in 2021. And Julia next.
Town Board Resolution 35793, co-sponsored with Councilman Scavone, resolution of adoption amending Chapter 312-26, Vehicles and Traffic, to prohibit parking on Montauk Highway, County Road 80, at its intersection with Walnut Avenue and West End Avenue, East Quogue.
Yeah, we held a hearing on that already. Julie, you have the next one too.
Town Board Resolution ID 35803, co-sponsored with Councilman Martell, resolution of adoption amending Town Code Chapter 312, parking by permit on select town roads.
Right, we held a hearing on that. So that had all those changes. So this, and we closed that hearing, Julie?
Yes.
Okay, so that's eligible for a vote? Okay.
Town Board Resolution ID 35802, co-sponsored with Councilman Martell, resolution to adopt local law amending Town Code Chapter 312, seasonal no parking on select roads.
Okay, and that's related to, we held the hearing. We left the hearing open though, I think for written comments, right?
Yes, I don't remember if it was our usual 2 weeks or something slightly less. Sunday?
I think it was the 2 weeks.
Did we get any written comments?
I did see at least one letter, and I know that Tom Neely had reached out to that person today. So I'm waiting to hear what their conversation was.
Right. I think it's important whenever we, like, not just pertaining to this one, but that the board, when we leave the record open, that the board is fully aware of whatever written comments come in before that the board votes. So.
Well, let me just assure you that any written comments that are submitted to my office get distributed to all of you, the town attorney's office, and any other departments that should be knowledgeable about or involved in the hearing process for that particular topic. If they send anything directly to any of you and don't CC me, then I'm unable to put it into the record unless you forward it to me. So that's why I always try and get them to include me in their submissions.
Well, thank you, Sandy. Okay, 35714, resolution of adoption amending Town Code Chapter 8 as it relates to debt reduction for capital projects. We're having that hearing earlier that day, so I'm hoping we don't have to leave the record open on that one because we are trying to go out to bond early, well, this month, pretty soon. 3553, resolution of adoption amending Town Code Chapter 250, outdoor sidewalk dining to waive particular provisions in response to COVID-19 pandemic, subject to fire marshal's approval. Again, we'll have that hearing earlier that day, and hopefully we'll be able to adopt that. Tommy John?
Town Board Resolution 35829, authorize the acceptance of a donation of native redbud tree in Bridgehampton.
Town Board Resolution ID 35772, a resolution authorizing Jewel Assets Incorporated to negotiate an opt-out CDBG program for inclusion in the town's CCA program. And this will be subject to work session, our next item on the work session today to talk about that. I was originally going to ask to talk about all our energy projects, but I think due to the change of time, and I know that our Jewel representative in this work session has a tight schedule, so we'll probably just keep this focused mainly around CDG.
What does that stand for, CDG?
Community Distributed Generation.
Yeah, John, did you want me to add with Jessica's help a little background here?
Sure.
No, maybe we should do that after we get through the agenda, because that's actually going to be one of the items, right, coming up?
It's
Yeah,
in work.
just that our representatives from Jewel are online right now, and they have a limited amount of time. We can do it later. I'm happy to stay online and answer any of your questions, but
It's
Jewel won't be
literally-
available.
It's literally the next item on our agenda, Frank. So once we get
Okay.
to the draft, we'll go right to it. We're almost at the end of the agenda here.
All right, then we'll stop talking and keep you guys moving.
All right, thanks. Rick, you have the next resolution?
Yeah, Town Board Resolution ID 35801, resolution authorizing the supervisor to execute documents necessary to request variances and secure permits for proposed improvements at Hampton West Park, 700 Stewart Avenue in West Hampton.
Town Board Resolution ID 35791, accept the maintenance bond in connection with the site plan of Canal Properties, Hampton Boathouses. Town Board Resolution ID 35786, release maintenance bond in connection with the site plan of Minogue Pools, Shinnecock Hills.
All right, 35333, accepts retirement of Kathleen Deneen, therapeutic activities worker and senior services. 35777, amends town workplace wellness program. 35763, approves excess vacation carryover from 2020 to 2021 for CSCA members. 35811, authorized town personnel from the town attorney's office to attend the 2021 Association of Towns all virtual education training.
Go ahead. Town Board Resolution 35792, co-sponsored with Councilwoman Lofsted. Notice the public hearing to consider amending Town Code Chapter 312, Article 5, Vehicles and Traffic, to enact changes in the no parking regulations on Sabonic Inlet Road and Town Point Road. Town Board Resolution ID 35810, also co-sponsored with Councilwoman Lofsted. Notice the public hearing to consider amending Town Code Chapter 312, Article 10, Vehicles and Traffic, to enact changes in the parking by permit regulations on Sunset Avenue, Hampton Bays.
Sergeant Miller, I'll call you right back. I'm in the town board meeting.
Board Resolution 35731, notice of public hearing to consider amending Town Code Article 10.1 Agricultural Conservation District to reduce the acreage requirement from 10 acres to 7 acres. This is the Agricultural Conservation District. In our research, the Ag and Markets Law, all of their thresholds dealt with 7-acre farms. And so what we're proposing here is to reduce our proposed agricultural conservation districts from 10 acres to 7 acres. Of course, this would all be subject to negotiations and specific easements laid out in those agreements.
Okay.
We'll have a public hearing on it.
John?
Town Board Resolution ID 35494, accept grant of trail easement in connection with the abandonment of Harrison Avenue in North Sea. And I think that is the last.
Were there any other add-ons? I didn't see.
Yes.
There's
Yes?
one from Janice submitted
All right, I don't
from
have,
personnel.
I don't have that.
who's offering it?
It's some from Sandra in Human Resources.
And who's sponsoring it? Probably me, right?
Yes,
Personnel.
sir, it's you.
Could you
I
just,
can read it if you'd like.
yeah,
It's
would you please?
ratify stipulation of settlement and general release and accept resignation.
All right, I got it. That's of a highway worker?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm familiar with this.
Says automotive equipment operator.
Yep, okay. All right, so let's add that to the agenda as well. So there's no other add-ons, right?
That's the only one I have.
All right, is everybody okay with having Sunday publish the agenda?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right.
Thanks, Sunday.
All right. Let's move on now to what was our 12 o'clock item, which is now 12:17 by my clock. So this is going to be an update on energy projects and programs. We're joined by Frank Sapone, my deputy supervisor. Also, we have Janice Shearer, who is our director of land planning and development. And do we have Lynn Arthur? I don't see her. We have Jessica Strombach from Jewel Assets. And Frank, do we have Lynn Arthur joining us or no?
I think Lynn is just on the phone, Jay, listening in and wasn't able to dial in with video. So
Okay.
she's able to speak up if there's a question for her to answer. But Jessica, who is the managing director for Jewel, is available, and therein lies the resident expertise. So we're going to rely on Jessica when it comes to that.
Okay, so who's got to kick it off? You, Frank?
Sure, I don't mind. This resolution, well, just to back up a little bit, the board members know that we have been working diligently to advance a CCA program here in the town. Back in May of this year, LIPA approved what's known as a tariff, which is essentially a policies and procedures document that would allow CCA to move forward in the LIPA service area. That was a big step forward because elsewhere in the state that protocol had existed since 2016. LIPA was a little bit late to the party, but they did approve it. In December of this year, they approved another tariff, a policy and procedures document, which allowed for CDG. And in the simplest terms, and I'm going to ask Jessica to fill in any blanks that I inadvertently leave out, community distributed generation is a program where locally generated energy can be provided to the ratepayers through the grid. So as a simplest example, if we were to develop a solar array on the community distributed generation, that solar array would be available to ratepayers throughout the community. One of the advantages here for our CCA program is that CDG, based on a ruling from the Public Service Commission, can be incorporated into a CCA program. So we could have access to a renewable energy source, we the town, that we could then provide to some of the constituents in the town, and there are some criteria that we could establish for that. We could also benefit ourselves as a municipality by using some of that resource to meet some of our own energy needs. This is separate and apart from any of the pricing structures that are associated with LIPA. So as we navigate through those problems, this is an opportunity to present a program where we can bring renewable energy into the community at potentially a reduced cost and also at some additional financial benefit to the town if such a project is developed on town property. And we are talking about a couple of possibilities right now. There would be some fee paid to the town for the lease of that land, in addition to some other benefits associated with the availability of that renewable energy. What this resolution does is it gives our CCA administrator, Jewel, who I might add is the only certified CCA administrator in New York State that is approved by the PSC to collab or to embed a CDG program in CCA. So we're in a little bit of an advantageous position by having the right administrator in place at the right time. So if this resolution allows the supervisor to, allows Jewel, excuse me, to begin to investigate the viability of CDG projects and present recommendations to the board if they formulate such projects for approval to go forward and incorporate them in our CCA program. In not quite 25 words or less, I tried to give you an overview. Jessica, is there anything that you want to add to what I've said so far?
Just no, I think that's very clear. The other point that we would just add is that we would submit the plan for Southampton to the Department of Public Service. So that would also be a step that this resolution allows us to submit the plan to the Department of Public Service, which is the next step that's required in making these programs available to Southampton.
And I think that's a,
yeah,
I'm just
that's
gonna,
an important first step to get the next set of permissions.
yeah, it's not just because Jewel recommends it and we like what they recommend. Whatever recommendation is made has to be approved by the Public Service Commission.
Exactly.
So if there are any questions from board members or Tommy John?
Yeah, would this CDA program allow homeowners who have solar energy to sell energy back to the CCA grid?
It is a completely separate program. So the homeowners that already have solar maintain the same benefits that they have today. This is for homeowners or apartment renters or whoever who don't have access to solar other ways.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, piggybacking on that, can a homeowner have such a system where they are, let's say they're the only house in the neighborhood that has the capability to do solar, where they become a CDA, is that?
A CDG provider. CDG solar fields are larger. So they're like between 1.5 and 5 megawatts, and a household is going to be a few kilowatts. So it's a much smaller size. So no, it's really to enable the town to provide a set of services now available to homeowners of larger homes and with solar panels to those who do not have that opportunity. So it opens up a different portion of the population.
If the town felt that, let's say, had a suitable property for a solar array, that might be the kind of thing that would fall into this program.
Exactly.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So that's where we would be able to.
So
Yeah,
we would make the land, we would lease the land potentially then to a solar company, and it would be part of our community choice aggregation program, this community distributed generation, and
Yes.
hopefully would lower everybody's rates. What's in it for Jewel?
It's the same cost structure as with electricity supply, where we are paid from the CDG provider for the service. And then part of that payment is actually passed on to the town, but we get for customer acquisition, we are paid, and then for servicing those customers, helping them with churn management, et cetera, the legal things that the solar provider has to do, we support them in that, and they pay us for that service.
So is it on a per kilowatt basis?
Yes.
Okay.
It may be.
And
helpful.
it's the same structure as with an electricity supply CCA. So this is the same payment structure as with that. It's not separate.
I'm a little confused on that. You're not double billing in a sense, because it's
No.
in the utility bill. You're getting a piece of that, right? And also on the generation side, you're getting a piece of that.
So not, no, because they're really separate programs. So assuming the town of Southampton moves forward with electricity supply at the same time as the CDG, you're not double billing because you're not getting paid twice for the same kilowatt. That's the easiest way to say
It
it.
sounds like you're getting paid a little bit for the generation of it and then a little bit for the use of it.
No. Generation in both sides, because these are just two forms of generation. One is electricity supply from one type of power plant. The other is electricity supply from a CDG power plant. So it's generation both times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something about that? I saw you waving a hand. No? All right, maybe I misunderstood. All right.
No, that's Janet. Not sure. Janice, did you have anything to add?
No, sorry. Charles is telling me to turn my iPad the other direction. I
Okay.
apologize. We're trying to figure this out.
It's the hand motion to adjust your camera that makes people think that you're raising your hand.
Right.
So
Sorry about that.
just to reiterate that this resolution would authorize Jewel to investigate the viability of various kinds of projects and determine if there are developers who are interested in implementing such a project. With the help of Christine Fenton particularly, we're investigating some sites in town that might be viable. We've also reached out to NIPA for some analysis of some of our sites to see if they're viable. And I think in several months, we might have an opportunity to come back to the board and say, I think we have a real CDG project that might be suitable for our community.
So, but there's no compensation to Jewel until a facility is constructed, correct?
That's correct. So we're not compensated until a program is launched.
Until there's actual generation from that construction.
So generation.
Their payment, if you will, if I'm understanding it correctly, is from the developer. The developer is responsible for those financial obligations, not the town or the ratepayer.
Right, but we would be making Jewel our exclusive administrator for CDG.
Well, they in a sense are now, Jay, and they are the only CCA administrator in the state authorized by the PSC at the moment to function in that capacity.
Okay.
And that's a boon to us. And additionally to that, one of the big things that I've always wanted to do, make sure happens, is that Southampton Town leads by example. This opens up a lot of ability for us to use town properties and other things for us. We don't, still as a town, we have one facility with solar panels on it. And this opens up the possibility for us to lead more by example and have these distributed generation systems out there. But it also incentivizes a lot of creativity. We have other sources of power that we can take advantage of going into the future. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us to be able to spread some of the benefits around also for those people who cannot benefit from some of the distributed solar that's there. This offers that opportunity to them as well. So it's a good thing all around. And we got lucky that Jewel got certified first, but I'm sure there'll be more to follow with the PSC.
All right, other questions for Frank or Jessica?
Yes, I have a question. I know that I've heard people say that they don't like, mowing down a forest to put up a solar panel. We have lots of parking lots. Is that one option that we're looking at to do? I know the county has lots of those over all their parking spots, which is threefold. It produces the energy, it doesn't mow down a forest, and it covers people when they're running through bad weather.
Yeah, Julia, yes, that is certainly one of the possibilities and one of the criteria that we, as representing the town, myself, Janice, Christine, we're looking at town-owned properties that are already disturbed in some way, like a landfill. So we're not interested in properties that will require clearing for any program that the town would support.
Okay, thanks.
And Julie, also our laws don't provide for that, for clearing on that basis, but we do have a lot of properties that need remediation. And part of that, passing that on to a developer who wants to come in, is the remediation of that property to make it suitable for the installation of solar panels or other forms of power generation, even battery storage and those kinds of things. And they need to be located in certain areas. And one of the things that's brought to the table, Jewel brings to the table, and part of this, what we're talking about, is that they'll be able to come back to us and recommend some of these sites, some of these projects, and then we look at them based on the board has the ultimate decision as to decide whether to move forward with those or not. So you'll be looking at things that come forward in the future on an individual basis.
Something I'd like to bring up at the outset here is, this may be a bit down the road, but if we are to purchase solar panels, I certainly hope that we would give all deference to American-made products when we install these. If we install these, hopefully we will. I want to.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly conversations you can have with developers where the sourcing of some of the equipment is, but don't narrow your thinking down to just solar. Also realize that there are many other forms of power generation that are available. Everything from tidal powers to tidal power to different types of power generation on a larger scale that would be suitable for this kind of project. The idea is that we don't want to be dependent on fossil fuels at all, and that we want to have a greater provision for providing alternative energy sources to our residents.
And I completely agree with everything that you said. I didn't mean to limit myself in any way, except to say that if we were going to purchase things, I hope they're made in Buffalo or someplace where, in our country.
So if there aren't any additional questions on this particular topic, I'm looking at the clock here and I'm mindful that Jessica has a hard stop. So I know there are a couple of other items that we want to summarize here with Janice's help, but if there are no other CDG questions on this particular resolution that's going to be before the board on Tuesday, I'm going to ask if it's okay if we excuse Jessica and we just move on with the rest of the presentation.
Fine. Thank you, Jessica,
Thank you.
Sorry we were rushed, but I thank you very much.
Great to meet all of you. I hope I can meet you in person sooner rather than later. And
Yes.
look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you.
Jessica.
Okay,
Thank you.
you. Bye.
So Janice, John, did you want us to review a little bit about the battery storage project or the code or anything? What topics did you have in mind?
Well, the battery storage in particular, because I think it's related to the subject that we just talked about. I think that's also part of what we need to do. I think the board has been, has gotten a lot of information. They may just have some questions on that. It's really up to you, Janice, and what you want to pull here.
Well, as you know, at your last meeting, you adopted the battery storage code that allows for residential battery storage, commercial battery storage, and then battery storage as an actual land use where someone is storing energy from the grid and like almost operating in a marketplace where they're storing it and selling it back to LIPA or in this as a service or as a market. So we are at the moment, Mike is working on, we have created a fast track type of building permit so that when someone just wants to put a simple battery in their house, they don't have to like get a survey and all the other things that are required in the building department. It'll be relatively simple, a very simple form, small fee, and you would get an electrical permit as well, but it'll be fairly painless. But we do have New York State Building Code to implement, so we have to make sure, it's not too close to your burner where it could spark, or it's got a fire rated wall, or whatever requirements are in the New York State Building Code is why we need to take a look at it. So we'll be doing that with the battery storage. We have actually 3 separate permits. One is the real simple residential one. One is if you're doing like the full blown site plan, big one, where you need planning board. And then there's this mid-range one where you may be constructing something to put the batteries in other than your existing house or garage or basement. So, but we're working with Dennis, we'll work on that, and we should have that rolled out by next week. So that's our battery. At the same time, I've been working together with Claire in planning Claire Shea to work out the solar code, as we've been talking about, to allow for large scale solar. And that's another thing where we've identified avoidance areas and created a more rigorous process for that versus opportunity areas, which John just touched on, which are more like, giving a pathway for these maybe sand mines or other types of uses to move toward a conforming use like a solar array, and making it much easier for them because we're encouraging that use to move towards something else versus someone who has to clear 30 acres or something. And that would be that green for green idea that we don't really, see as a benefit. So we hope to get that in front of you hopefully by the end of the month. We're just trying to iron out a couple of details. So I'll have another work session so we can go over that code as well.
Excellent. All right, any questions for Frank or Janice? All right, that's great.
Wow. So that up in this
That means
package.
we did a good job.
Absolutely.
Great. So let's
All right. Thank you all.
Oh,
Thank you.
Janice,
Thanks, guys.
before you go, just real quick, it's sort of, you made me think about it when you talked about sand mines becoming solar fields, this idea of going from one non-conforming use to another use. The solar field would become a conforming use though, and wouldn't have to go through the procedure from one non-conforming use to another. But I'm trying to get you involved in a phone call. I guess we have to reschedule it to talk about some of the comments that came up at the first public hearing regarding the ZBA and switching, the planning board. I know you were at the planning board meeting, I believe, when they were discussing it, their recommendations. They seem to feel that certain things should stay with the ZBA if it's very close to the current use. Other things should go to the town board or the planning board. So anyway, I don't even have to comment on it now, other than I'd like to have a separate meeting with you to talk about some of the suggestions that are floating.
Sure. And I'm writing that up for them as well. Some of the suggestions, although they sound good, like bringing it to the planning board, it actually doesn't work that way. Like it would be very difficult because they are not a quasi judicial board. So that kind of opportunity isn't really there. But we did talk about like parity of uses or thresholds or standards. So I'd be happy to go over all that with you.
Okay, appreciate that.
Sure, anytime. Thank you.
I will let you go.
Okay, have a good day, everyone.
All right, so the next item,
Thanks.
we're going to go to updates. So there's quite a few things. So let me start out with updates. We already had Ryan do the COVID update, so I'll skip COVID. So obviously one of the main things I wanted to update you on was the storm response. So February 1st, we had a significant snow event. Depended on where you were in town, how deep that snow was. Some areas were about a foot of snow in the western portion of town. I think Remsenburg had about a foot or 10 inches, something like that. Oh, Ryan is still here with us too. So Ryan was very involved in the storm response. That's great. We did eventually call a local state of emergency because the highway superintendent did request the ability to do some of the private roads where he had concerns that we could not get an ambulance down or a police car. So I did authorize any private roads where the accumulation was over 6 inches that the highway department could then go ahead and plow it, as they did. I want to first thank the highway superintendent and particularly the workers there for working literally over a 24-hour period from 5 o'clock one morning to 5 o'clock the next in terms of making sure that the roads were as safe as possible. And they really did, I thought, an excellent job on the roads. So thank you to all the men and women in highway. And look, I think for the most part, we did okay. We had about 1,000 people at one point without power. PSE&G, they stepped up and they had some local crews out here and they got everybody back powered as quick as possible. We did have some erosion. I don't know if you guys were circulated the report that Aram did on erosion, but we had some minor, maybe a little more than minor erosion. Tiana and couple Sandbar Beach, I think was another spot that had some erosion. Quag Village, at the Quag Village Beach, the sand on those sandbags all got washed away. So we're still sort of sizing up the impacts. We had some flooding for sure, particularly in the Peconics, the typical spots, the road ends, like Long Neck Boulevard, or I think it's Royal, where we had some flooding at the ends of those roads. Ryan, do you want to add more to this piece about the storm response?
Sure. Everything that you mentioned so far is accurate. We saw water in all the normal places that we routinely see water. Dune Road was closed in the areas that we keep barricades in place year round to be able to pull out onto the roadway because we know that it's going to have water up on the road. As you mentioned, Supervisor, Long Neck, we saw water from Pine all the way down to the bay. We saw water on Upper Red Creek Road, Royal, as you mentioned. Overall, I think we did a great job with the storm. I agree. Highway did a fantastic job keeping the roads as clear as possible, and in the face of close to an inch an hour at different points in the storm, and that's tough to keep up with. But everybody did a great job with it. I want to certainly thank the staff in the fire marshal's office that was with me in the EOC throughout the storm as well, fielding calls and helping to pass stuff on to PSEG. Total, we had about 13 motor vehicle accidents in the town, 14 or so other, traffic hazards where we had, traffic lights out or branches or tree limbs down across roadways. About 11 or so disabled vehicles that were stuck in the snow or slid off the road. One fire where wires had come down into a tree and set the tree on fire, and between 13 and 20 other just miscellaneous storm related utility type calls. So all in all, not terrible. It could have been a lot worse. We had less snow, being that we're further east on the island than up west did, and so that worked to our advantage in terms of all of this. And I think it could have been worse, but we did really well with the storm.
We did, as you know, we closed town hall on Monday. On Sunday afternoon, I made the decision, based on the forecast and in consultation with Ryan and Chief Skornicki and with Superintendent Gregor. It did seem like there was enough information out there to call that early. That's what we did. It turned out to be the right decision. I always get nervous based on weather forecasts because you don't really, sometimes they over predict, but this one turned out, if anything, they under predicted it. So it was really bad that morning. So we stayed closed. It's interesting that in the pandemic, I think just there's less people on the road. People are used to now doing a lot of things from home that they might not have otherwise been doing. So it really helped the highway folks out there clearing the roads, and helps with public safety, obviously, if you have less cars on slippery roads. So it's interesting that if there's any silver lining, and there aren't many based on the tragedy of this pandemic, but that's one positive, I guess, we could find, is that less cars were out on the road because people were home, working from home from the pandemic. So But anybody have any questions about the storm response? You know, again, thank you to the highway folks, but also thank you to all the other people in storm response from our, Christine Fenton's group, to Kristen Dulos's and Parks Public Works, also the police department, Ryan's folks. We have a lot of people who work through those storm events. So thank you all. Any questions? All right. Good job, Brian, on that. All right. So next up, in terms of updates, give me 1 second. All right. So the next thing I want to mention is we held a second listening session with the Community Law Enforcement Review Committee. We held that on Tuesday night, February 2nd. It was heavily promoted. The group, the outreach group subcommittee did a great job in terms of getting the message out. There were not a lot of people who attended that. I mean, we had the full committee. We had maybe 2 or 3 people from the public speak, maybe 4. One was a former police officer who, had some really positive things to say about the police department. There was one immigrant who had some not so positive experiences in the past, who talked about that and, offered some suggestions about how to improve some things. And we had a woman who had spoke at the first public listening session come back and with some positive news in terms of follow-up, which was good. And I think pretty much, I may be forgetting someone, but I think pretty much that's it. I think it was a really positive session, and the committee felt very strongly of doing 2 of these. And I guess it's somewhat positive that we're not getting a lot of complaints about the police department, as much as we are doing, really going as far as we can to solicit comment. Doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. We know that there is. So, but our report's sort of coming together. Christine Scalera has been working on it, and the next step will be to notice a public hearing for our draft report. We have a tentative date for a public hearing, which will be on March 2nd at 6 p.m. And I know you guys have been in the loop, so you're getting a lot of the information from Christine. So if you guys have any questions, Tommy John, did I leave anything out that you wanted to mention from the listening session?
No, you didn't. I thought they were very good. Opening communication is always good, and the members of our police force are on the calls, of course, and they're doing a fantastic job, as are the volunteers, in getting people out and really bringing up some concerns in the community and how we can better our police force and communication, and promote some of the programs that we are already doing, and suggest some programs that may work better for us.
All right. Any questions on that from the board? All right. Seeing none.
Jay, can I just comment on that? Because I did listen in the other night.
Yeah. I saw you listening in.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I was, I was really impressed that 90% of it was positive for our police force. I never really had any doubts that they were going to screen well in this process. I think the biggest thing, Minerva had some comments also. They were pretty well all positive, but it boiled down to communication, the lack of Hispanic officers and the translation process. And I think that's something that's in that report that we're going to be working on. And from all of this, I think that was one of the most important things out of the whole findings.
No, thank you for that. I think it's a really great committee. It's really diverse. We have a lot of voices from a broad sector of the community. And I don't know what other communities are doing to respond to the governor's mandate, but I know that we've taken it very seriously. And I think we're going to get a really good product to come out of it.
So I just wanted to say that we had not gotten really updates until Christine had come to us. Julie and myself, we spoke with her for some time, and she went over in quite some detail. And it was actually fortuitous because I was able at the Antibodies Task Force to talk about this effort. And there was a lot of positive feedback. And there's the same thing that you had said, Supervisor, that the indication that there was less complaint, more constructive criticism, but more constructive outcome from this. So it seems to have everybody really, really positive. One of the subjects that did come up was our other incorporated villages are doing similar efforts under the same mandate, but we're our deliverable stands alone to the governor, obviously, but the Jim Banks, who I think also sits on your committee, who is the chairman of among all his other things that he does, is a chairman of the Antibodies Task Force, was trying to get some of the survey data from the other municipalities to look at it in a whole way. Understand, we had a long discussion about it, understanding that that the governor will take that information and I'm sure consolidate that into a regional effort to sort of show the pros and cons of different groups. But the one question that did come up was the interaction between the two police departments of different municipalities. And I thought that was an interesting subject. I wasn't sure how much that had been covered in your discussions when there's the inability for a Southampton town officer to be in place in an adequate time frame due to a complaint of some kind. We have some agreements with some of our other incorporated villages to take up that slack until Southampton can get together. So I thought that was kind of an interesting dynamic because the difference in approach from the local villages as opposed to the town of Southampton, there seemed to be, they were indicating there should be more synergy between those groups. So I just thought that was an interesting bit of feedback to share with you guys.
Right,
but very, very positive. I got to tell you, a few times I've sat in the Antibodies Task Force when there's been so much positivity and people excited about what the outcome of this.
That's good. Jim Banks is certainly a strong voice on the committee, and as you know, he is not silent. So he is giving us positive feedback. As far as the other villages, they are separate municipalities, and so there's a separate chain of command there, and we did consider that as well early.
Good.
All right, so I'm going to move on to my last topic. Yesterday was the presentation to Moody's and Investor Services. We're getting ready to go out to bond, to the market to borrow money, roughly $13 million for a number of projects. The West Hampton Community Center is one of them, but there are some others as well. So, this is something that typically precedes those borrowings where these credit rating agencies try to tell investors how solid an investment it is lending money to the town of Southampton. So it gives me the opportunity to sort of brag about our financial leadership team and our financial positions and all the great things we're doing in the town and convince them that it doesn't get any better than the town of Southampton in terms of our ability to repay our obligations. And we put together, I'd say, about a 27-page PowerPoint presentation. I was the lead presenter, but I also had Len Marchese, our controller, there, and we had Noah, our advisor, and I think it went really well. It was interesting. Some of the questions by this particular analyst, and John, you might be interested in hearing this, was about resiliency, about our codes, our coastal management policies, and whether we're requiring structures to be set back or elevated, or what the future would present in terms of challenges to the town of Southampton in terms of planning as a coastal community. So we're actually forwarding to this analyst our sustainability plan, the Sustainability 400 plan, as well as our coastal resources management plan for him to review. But, I talked a lot about our energy programs, how we converted the street lights to LED lights, how we increased the ratings on buildings, the energy ratings, the HERS ratings, and some of the other things that we're doing. I even mentioned, Julie, the ban on plastic straws and styrofoam containers. And he was very interested to see that we were sort of on the leading edge of a lot of these environmental programs. It's interesting that an organization like Moody's would be starting to look in their ratings at some of these type of issues in terms of, preparing for global warming and sea level rise and energy efficiencies. I talked about the purchasing of electric cars and the electric charging stations that we're doing. And, he was really interested. He was really interested in all of it, all of our efforts to reduce our carbon footprint and set goals.
It's a big deal. We presented last year that the ratings companies, Moody's included, are looking at those issues as a big part of their rating system. So I'm glad to hear that that's actually
firsthand. You were right, John. They are looking at these things, and it was, they gave me a lot of, it gave me the ability to brag about the work that we're doing. I mentioned that we're certified as a climate smart community. Even the CCA work, which I don't think I mentioned, but that is, just another step in terms of energy independence and reducing our carbon footprint. So, I think we're on the leading edge of these things. I believe I mentioned the new code for battery storage, and that we're working on solar codes as well. So on that front, we have a lot of things to talk about. But now we are, Moody's has us as AAA with a stable outlook. That is the highest rating that Moody's offers, AAA with a stable outlook. The best I can hope for is that we stay there, right? We can't go up anymore. I made a very strong case that the conditions that earned us the AAA with a stable outlook, which was about, I think, in 2017, after I presented to Moody's then, that the situation has only improved. We've improved from there. Our full value assessments have gone up significantly from that point. Our reserves have gone up significantly from that point. If we qualified then, we're even better positioned today. So hopefully, if I knock on wood somewhere, that they'll recognize that the town is in equal or stronger position than it was, and they'll put together a strong statement which will allow us to get the lowest possible interest rates on this borrowing. So I think it went well. Len thinks it went well. Noah thinks it went well. So I guess it went well. We'll find out when they issue their report. Any questions on that?
When is the report to get issued?
Soon, because the bond sale is, I think, around the 17th of February. So we're talking about a week from now.
Okay. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Well, I think it's great news because it has a reverse effect. It incentivizes municipalities to work harder on some of the environmental issues that you mentioned as well. And we have an opportunity right now. The Peconic Estuary program, and one of their main focuses is exactly that. And some of the questions that we had about valuation, particularly in relationship to sea level rise, and what policies to undertake, and working with legislator Krupski on stuff like that. So I look at that as really positive, because that sends a message to other municipalities that maybe contemplating doing this. There's a real incentive to move forward. So thank you, Jay. That's really good news.
Yeah, no, it was really good. Let me just think if there's anything else I want to mention to you guys. I am trying to set up a Zoom meeting with Assemblyman Thiel regarding the assessment changes that we're looking for. The reason why I'm mentioning this, because, you know, one thing that did strike me during the Moody's presentation is, you know, we've had 2 years now where we've frozen the value for assessment purposes of real property. So, you know, there's one chart where you can see the value of the town going up and up and up every year, and then it starts to level off. And I had explained that we were only capturing new construction in those years, not changes in the marketplace. And the actual true value of the town was not 74 billion, but probably, you know, in excess of 80 billion, maybe even 90 billion, that we've seen this, you know, 20% increase in property values, so in some places more, just in the pandemic year. So we're, you know, we have this big decision coming at us at some point, but I am trying to get Fred Thiel and now State Senator Palumbo to discuss with us this idea of state legislation that will allow us to sort of return to full market valuation with the protections we've discussed, the homestead exemption of 50,000, as well as a 5% cap on the market trend adjustment. So, and then we're going to have this big decision: do we reset the, you know, the market trend to where it is today, or do we leave it at where it was when we put the freeze in place? And I don't know the answer, other than we may not get enabling legislation prior to us having to make this decision. So we may be faced with going back to market trend, or possibly extending the 2-year freeze. You don't have to make this decision now, but we're going to have to wrestle with this at some point. It's coming at us. Now, some areas went up faster than others, there's no question, in this pandemic. The waterfront properties, the properties that are predominantly second home areas, summer home areas, but across the board, properties went up. Hampton Bays went up, Riverside, Flanders, everywhere went up. The higher end properties went up, you know, like Southampton Village went up a lot. So if we unlock the market trend analysis, we're going to see some properties jump by, you know, 30%, 40. And those people are going to be calling us saying they're going to be nervous about their taxes. So this is an issue we're going to have to wrestle with. There's no question about it.
Yeah. It's an interesting question because, you know, we don't know what normal is. Clearly, there's a reaction to the pandemic, and we've had these increases as we've frozen assessments. You know, you could back into that over a period of time and maintain a cap, or you could change that from the market valuation system altogether. It's an interesting question because I don't think
correct. It could correct. I remember when we did the market trend freeze, that, you know, I at that point did not think the market would go up significantly, not like it did. It was a surprise to all of us. Obviously, the pandemic came out of nowhere, and who knew that you know, who would have thought a pandemic would accelerate property values? But people fled areas of higher concentrations like New York City and could work from home, and what better place to work than out in the Hamptons? So, but yeah, this is going to be a big decision we face. I'm already starting to think about it and how we're going to navigate through it. I have some ideas, but the board will have to wrestle with this, whether we're going to continue to freeze it or unlock it, or, you know, really depending also on whether the state gives us an ability. If the state does not give us the ability to put these protective mechanisms in place, there, you know, we might want to walk away from being a full value community. That's a big decision too. But
I was going to bring that up, Jay. Most communities, most towns in the state go to some kind of multiplier, and that's maybe something that we may want to go to as a full market valued town. We're actually in the minority in that regard. So
Large minority.
the downside of it,
assessed either. So we have that to deal with as well. I think we're under-assessed as a town. And I agree with you, Tommy John, that, maybe full 100% market valuation is really not the way to go. But there's a lot to discuss.
All right, let me caution you on that, though. The analysis that we did really showed that through the years, the burden of paying for the town's operation has been shifting more and more to the people who can most afford it. There's no question that properties east of the Shinnecock Canal, in terms of, we're going to collect the money to run the town, but the slice of the pie from east of the canal is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And west of the canal is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So the system we have has actually been very good in terms of keeping property taxes down in working class areas. That's not to say it always will be like that, but historically, so the fear that abandoning our system might shift the burden over time back to working class areas and let the wealthiest areas sort of off the hook, it's something we need to consider in this decision.
It's legitimate.
Is there any way that we can get some data on neighborhoods throughout all the hamlets to see which alternative, how that would affect that neighborhood at, as current a point as we can, instead of just doing east or west or hamlet to hamlet, to actually pick out some neighborhoods witin those hamlets?
So Lisa Gorey has data from the past. Obviously, we don't have data from the future, but we can look at, the last 20 years or so.
Don't underestimate Lisa. Right.
To see how our system has affected those communities. And we have, as the review committee, the technical advisory committee, we did do this. And that's why, that's how I came up with this conclusion that the current system, in spite of the problems it has on certain individuals, on the whole has been actually very helpful to working people.
Sure.
But you end up with the situation like we saw, where a retired school teacher back in the 60s bought a waterfront property that was affordable in North Sea that now is worth 10 times as much, and is faced with the decision, do I sell the property because I can't afford to pay the taxes? There are those anomalies, and we want people to stay in their homes and enjoy their retirement. So it's not an easy thing to fix.
Right.
I think the recommendations we made, the homestead exemption and the 5% cap, do a pretty good job in solving the problem. If we don't get them from the state, your guess is sort of as good as mine as to what direction we should go, whether we should abandon the whole thing or go back to full value. If we go back to, full value, we're going to end up with this scenario where some people are going to be shocked, I think, at how much their property value has gone up since we've frozen the values. So this is sort of.
I hope the tax rates might level the tax increase somewhat, but
if everybody's property went up by 30%, nobody's paying more taxes, right? That's fine. If everybody goes up by 30%, the tax rate goes down, the amount of money that they pay is the same.
Right.
If those
relationship.
Some properties double, and others go up by 10%. So you got 100% here and 10% here, then you end up with this lopsided situation. And I'm afraid that is going to be the situation, that we've had certain areas go up extremely fast. But if we get
for the public certification, we control the assessment values, not the entire tax rate. There are other districts that set the tax rates, and mostly school districts. That's most of the property taxes, and that does vary from area to area. So, Supervisor, what you say with the town taxes, that's absolutely correct, but there are school district taxes.
This is different because you have a different tax district. But I'm glad you brought up the schools, because that's one of the things in the legislation. If the schools aren't part of it, it's not going to make much of a difference. So if we need to make sure that the schools are part of the the homestead exemption as well as the cap. the 5% cap. So within a school district like Hampton Bays, you may have some areas that are going up faster than others, even within a school district, Southampton as well. So if we can't provide relief on school taxes, then we're not going to make much of a difference to people, because that's the bulk. That's 70 to 80% of your property tax bill is your school tax. So, that will come out in the meeting with Assemblyman Thiel and Palumbo. How we're going to, whether it's going to be mandatory for the school district to accept our valuation, our assessment, or whether.
Yeah, in the western part of the town, it's even a larger percentage of the tax bill, for reasons we don't want to take up a lot of time with the board, but that's a disparity too, that I think really needs to, be discussed when you have that discussion.
Any other questions on that topic? I didn't even have it on the agenda to talk about, but I think it's important. So.
No, I was.
Yeah, do the local.
next when we went into other session, but I appreciate you talking about it, Jay. It is an important issue, and people are becoming aware of it.
Well, our freeze ends this year, right? This is the last year unless we extend it. So that decision is coming. All right. I'll turn it over to you guys. Do you guys have any updates you want to share?
Well, before we get off of this topic, I do have a question, and it's about our local school boards. Have they given comment on this proposal?
Not yet. The school, no matter what we do, the school will still collect the same amount of money. So this will only affect how it's apportioned within the school district. We do have on our committee a member of the Tuckahoe School Board. So we've had input in terms of creating these recommendations. Sean Hattrick was on the committee from Tuckahoe School Board, and Rick served on the committee as well. So yeah, they've been involved, but let's see what let's see what we can get out of Assemblyman Thiel and Senator Palumbo and what they're willing to do, and then we'll have to talk to the schools as well. But thank you for that, Tommy John.
Yeah, just a quick question before you move on that too. I understand we're obviously we're talking about East End and different varying property values, and we have this sort of diverse mixture of affluence and otherwise, but other parts of Long Island and New York State, for that matter, do you know if there's been sort of a similar increase in values as a result of the pandemic? As I've heard that Nassau County has had sort of a similar reaction, but I don't know about upstate New York. Is this a wider spread issue across the state of New York?
It's happening across the country, like areas like Florida, coastal properties. Things have gone up in value in places where, people can work from home, in a beautiful setting.
Yeah.
I think it's throughout New York State.
No question, especially I think outside the major metropolitan areas. I think
there's been a flight from the cities.
Yeah. That's what I understood too. Outside of cities across the country,
Westchester County and the surrounding areas have gone up. I know folks whose the values have gone up considerably in those areas. But just remember, like the supervisor said, we're the only one of the few towns in the state that did this 100% assessment. So
market value.
That's the market. So it does. Traditionally, you saw in the West, Nassau County is still struggling with it, where you have areas of the county that are very comparable to areas here, waterfront areas, the Gold Coast, and a lot of those properties in the Gold Coast haven't been really reassessed for some of them 70, 80 years, so they're out of balance. There's no question. And when they try to do it now, it causes quite the stir because they haven't been assessed. So the only time they do get a change in their assessed value from the county, from Nassau County, is when they do this work, when they do construction, when they take out a building permit, they enhance But other than that, there isn't this, periodic check on the assessed value of these properties that we have here.
Yeah.
And it does cause an imbalance, no question.
In theory,
Well, I mean, just the fact of that fact that we have, a small percentage of properties that are responsible for more than half of our property tax income. That's I think a little bit unique to these kinds of communities. I know that's experienced in Florida and so coastal communities elsewhere. It's the same issue because you have this very big difference in valuation of properties. So it's an interesting subject. Look forward to more in-depth discussion, Supervisor.
The theory is a good one, that the more valuable your property, the more taxes you'll pay. Right? That's fair. A more expensive property will pay higher taxes than a less expensive property. We're one of the only two communities, though, where we can say that, in terms of.
Well, you have the added pressures of sea level rise and issues of coastal retreat and infrastructure, all those kinds of things. It's, I sit on a committee in the county, coastal resiliency committee that, just was put together to look at exactly those issues and the impact that has on coastal communities that are really highly dependent on a transient owner situation, but properties of big value that are directly threatened by storms and sea level rises, storms as a result of sea level rise. So, those issues are interrelated and will continue to be more interrelated as you go into the future.
The popularity of our real estate market has had two other, as you know, budgetary effects on the town. One is mortgage tax revenues were extremely strong with the low interest rates and the activity in the real estate market. Well over $1 million above what we anticipated from last year. And CPF revenues were just through the roof.
That's a barometer of what's happening, obviously.
I haven't seen December's number, but the 11 months were already in record territory. So we're going to be somewhere in the $80 million range. It looks like for 2020. Extraordinary, right? Extraordinary. For, you typically expect 50 million in CPF revenue, 50 to 60 million. We're going to be in excess of 80 million.
But that's a function of a transaction. Obviously, valuation is part of that. It's a percentage of it, but it's also a part of
higher prices, higher volume,
number of transactions that occur. And that's also an interesting number. If you look deeper into that, the number of transactions versus the value of those transactions and what that percentage contribution to the CPF fund as a barometer is telling you two things. It's not telling you one thing, it's telling you two things. So interesting.
All right.
I'd like for us also to keep in mind that the folks who, like you said, Jay, have had their taxes increase and they have done nothing to their property. These are people who have lived here, raised their children here, or, they're members of our first responding units. And we really need to keep that segment of our community intact and in place here in Southampton.
Yeah, no, that, example,
I know.
A retired teacher, the pension is fixed. It doesn't escalate. At certain points it does, but in general, it doesn't escalate. So if you're on a fixed income, Social Security income, whatever it might be, you can't just magically come up with more money if your taxes go up by 20%. It creates a problem for people.
Well, and we should also consider what it would cost to pay ambulance workers as well as firefighting protection. We have these volunteers who donate thousands of hours of labor every year, and that's something that is not seen in our taxes. And if they leave, we're going to be paying, or the community.
No, we can't afford to.
Good point.
Have our working people pushed out of the community, right? So, absolutely, we won't be able to.
No.
But we need these protections, and that's really why the governor did the 2% tax cap, because he recognized that property taxes were, needed to be held back. 2% was sort of the rate of inflation. This is very similar. We're trying to get a cap on how much your assessment could go up in a given year from the market trend, which will affect your actual property taxes. So even though we might stay within the governor's 2% tax cap, if the town comes along and says, yeah, you didn't do anything to your property, but your value went up by 20%, you're likely going to pay 20% more in property taxes, not 2% more. So that's the problem we're trying to fix. So I think we will. I think we're doing a good job. I'll keep you guys posted after I've had the meeting with Assemblyman Thiel and Senator Palumbo. Okay, let's go to other updates. Anyone? Rick, nothing. John, nothing. Tommy John, anything? Julie?
Just something brief from our Agricultural Advisory Committee. They reported that their farm stands in the summer and fall, people were shopping local. And so I hope that continues after the pandemic, after this pandemic. So that's interesting too. And they also noted that many of the farms are changing their crops to a more, varied harvest. For those reasons, they're producing more like they were in the 1800s than they are, in the 1940s. Potatoes, wonderful, but they're certainly planting a lot of other crops on their properties to diversify their what they sell. So I thought that was interesting.
And those farmers markets are outdoors too.
Yeah.
Right? So people want to be outdoors. It just feels safer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to see a little segment on our Channel 20, touring the different farm stands and agricultural products here in Southampton town. When people come out here, they come out, for, I believe, those things and our beaches and some of the other wonderful amenities that we have. So
it sounds like you should do a show, Tommy John.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and that's going well. I can't tell you the launch date. I think by March 1st we'll be up and running, but hopefully sooner than that on Sun TV. So all right. Any other updates? All right. So let me just check. Did we have executive session items? I think we did.
We did.
Yeah, we do.
Let me pull up our agenda here. All right, executive session, we have confidential legal advice, litigation. Do we not have Lisa Combrink?
No Lisa today.
No Lisa, all right. So we're not doing land acquisition, and what about Sandra and personnel?
Not that I know of. No.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to end our work session and go into executive session on confidential.
Second.
Wait, hold on. Was somebody saying something? All right, I didn't. All right. So again, I'm making a motion to end our executive session, end our work session, and go into executive session for confidential legal advice and litigation matters. And seconded by Councilman Bouvier. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.